I could.
I could be wrong.
I could.
I could.
I could be wrong.
I could be wrong.
I could be.
I could.
I could be wrong.
I could be.
I could be.
I could be.
You know, I could be wrong.
Hey, welcome back to I Could Be Wrong. It's a podcast where Pastor Matthew and I sit down and talk about different current events, sometimes difficult topics to talk about, and try to show people how to do it well, how to do it with it honors each other and ultimately glorifies God. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you so much. And if you're back, welcome back. Matthew, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I just flew in last night from Africa, so I'm a little bit...
You groggy?
I am a little bit.
Sure.
When I came in this morning, I did a workout this morning, and it crushed my soul, and I've trying to be in recovery all day. So, you know how, I don't know if you have this experience, you get a few hours of sleep, you wake up and you go oh, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And then a few hours later, you're like, I am not
it
good
hits
to
you?
go.
Yeah,
so I'm a little bit of that, a little groggy.
So you told me, you said it's a 5-hour change, correct?
6 hours.
6 hours?
Yeah,
so
6
what,
hours ahead.
Is it ahead? So right now it's later on?
Yeah, so we're recording this at 3 p.m., so it'd be 9 o'clock. I'd be almost getting ready for bed there.
So what time did you wake up this morning? Was that normal?
I woke up this morning 5:45 a.m.
Yes, this is already a long day for you.
Yeah, and it was just after 2 days of multiple, we had 2 flights that were over 10 hours, and then a couple other shorter flights and just some layovers and stuff. So
well, we are glad to have you back.
It's
if you noticed, 2 weeks ago, we recorded 2 episodes in a row.
Yeah.
So if you watch, we're wearing the same clothes.
Yeah.
Thought about changing, then it's like, nope, here we are.
Exactly. Actually, someone said that to me. They're like, "Are you guys going to change?" And I was like, if you know Michael and I, the answer is absolutely not.
No, I'm not thinking about that much.
I'm not caring that much.
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
it's an Easter egg at that point. They can realize it. I also felt like I listened to the intros, at least both of them back, and the tone of them was a little different. Like the first one we did, it starts, "Hi, welcome back to I Could Be Wrong." The second one's like, "Hey, today we're going to talk about some stuff." You know?
I think I introed the second one, didn't I?
Yeah,
I was like,
it's the best intro we've done because you literally just said, "Hey, this I Could Be Wrong," where me and Michael talk about things that we want to talk about. So it's good.
That basically describes what happens when I have to do 3 services in a row. By the third one, it's like,
you're ordering pizza, right? Like the famous story.
Famous story that never happened.
Yeah. If you haven't heard that, there's a story where Matthew, back when there's a time when the church was called Lancaster Community Church, where we did 3 services, and that wasn't necessarily the hard part. The third one was at 1 o'clock or noon.
Yeah, we did
or something
9,
like
11,
that.
and 1.
9, 11, and 1. And the joke was that Matthew got more aggressively casual at that 1 o'clock service, to where one day the story is that he just goes, "You guys want to order some pizza?" Which you claim didn't happen.
No, so this is what we all know. Stories, every time we tell them, just tweak a little bit. So what happened was, I was more casual. There's no doubt about it. I knew that there was almost no chance that whatever I was doing at 1 o'clock was going to make it to the website. In the sense of it wasn't going online.
This is for the people in the room.
Yeah. If I knew I had not done well in the first 2 teachings, then I would be real buttoned in for the third. Mm-hmm. But if I knew we had a good one. So I was more tired. It was more casual. But when we finally realized that 1 o'clock just wasn't working, we were going to cancel it. Second to last. I was leaning on a table because I was teaching, but I said, hey, just as my appreciation, next week, we should get pizza or something like that after the service. So you guys, I'm going to do that. Let's do it. So that just made all of our staff laugh. And then it turned into that I was basically grabbed my cell phone in the middle of the message and ordered pizza.
Yeah, do you guys want some pizza? Let's eat some pizza.
Yeah.
But, no. All right. So here at I Could Be Wrong, we always open with a hot take. Mine, I just got in a big argument about it right before I came in here.
I haven't heard. I want to
hear it. Which is interesting because I don't think it felt like something that's not worth an argument. But believe it or not, when it comes to creative stuff, we can make an argument just out of just about anything. I don't like it when people call things a bar that aren't a bar. I just think it's a silly way to say something.
Give an example what you mean.
So today, So today we did a lunch and learn where I heard it marketed as we're going to have a hot dog bar. And I'm just like, it's just hot dogs on a table. Why do you have to call it a bar? Or I'll go to Connect.
Yeah, I don't know what the standard is for that.
I Googled it. This is a big debate. The definition is alcohol or refreshment served at a wooden table, usually anchored into one side of the wall.
Yeah.
When people just throw up a table and throw some baked potatoes on it, it's not a baked potato bar. You're just having baked potatoes. Okay. And that just, for some reason, it's always bothered.
So who got mad about that? You're right.
Well, it's not that. I think I am right. It's not that they got mad. It's that I think Kenneth Bertram will take any opportunity to argue if he has a shot at it. Yeah. If he's just like, well, what do you want him to call it? And then it turned into a whole thing. We're looking up definitions. On Google, that's my definition. Drew found a different website that said it could be any kind of food type thing on a bar.
I feel like those definitions, though, are people adapting definitions to how people are using a word versus otherwise.
I agree. It just feels like a weird way to. Or you know what else bothers me? When people go this shouldn't bother me, but it does. When people go, Oh yeah, well that's like Chipotle style. It's like that's even a trend. It's just Subway. Like they did it first. Like
That's true. That is 100%
now
true.
is that way uncooler to be like, yeah, because Mexican food in Subway style, that's not as cool because Subway is like not as classy as Chipotle, but that definitely came first. Subway was the OG. You
That's
go
a good
down the
point.
line and pick your things. You know,
You're absolutely right.
that's my hot
man.
take.
Yeah, the whole bar thing, I agree with that because I remember when people first started saying coffee bar, even at church, like I was always like, that doesn't feel right.
It just feels trendy.
Yeah,
It feels like a trendy thing.
It is more of a trend thing, but I didn't like it then. Okay. All right, so my hot take, Elvis Presley is a bad singer. Like, I know people are like loyal to him and love him.
Yeah.
I have never been fascinated with him. So like, even when I went and saw the most recent movie, which I did not really like, about him, though I thought the actor who played him was incredible.
Oh, he killed it.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where have you heard that he can't shake the
I was
accent?
gonna say he's still talking like that.
Still talking like that, which is super weird.
It's kind of funny.
It is funny.
It's a bad accent to be stuck in too.
His music, whenever I like, so people have loved it. Like my brother loves his music. So I remember being like, man, maybe I'm missing something. So I just got on Spotify and I'm like, I feel like, and part of his voice isn't good because anyone can mimic it. Mm-hmm. So like, I can't mimic.
It's a 100%. That's anybody can do it. It's not talent. It's not super talent driven. Yeah.
Like if you were like mimic Mariah Carey,
not a chance.
You know, you're like no, or Whitney Houston, or some of these big voices of our generation.
Yeah.
And Elvis like,
well, it feels like a joke. It feels like a bit. The way he's singing feels like an SNL character singing like somebody. It feels so dramatic. Yeah. You know, I think Elvis in general too. Like he is like the way that his life went, the way fame handled him, or the way he processed fame is one of the worst stories of Hollywood ever, about how it can just really mess somebody up. And I don't know that in my lifetime, maybe we were just talking about Michael Jackson too. Maybe Michael Jackson have people like have subcultures. Like I remember my third grade teacher, her name was Mrs. Price, loved, posters in the classroom. Like she had like basically a shrine of Elvis Presley.
Okay, I think you're talking about Michael Jackson.
Loved Michael Jackson.
Like, well, okay.
No, okay. No. So loved, like went to Graceland multiple times. Like basically took like a pilgrimage to like the place. I don't even know what his connection is to Graceland, but I don't know if he just loved it a lot or what. But I don't know that there's any other celebrity quite like Elvis that people have like worshipped like that. Specifically older people. They was like almost like reverend in their minds. And it's like, he's just a fine, and he stole a bunch of songs.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah. Do you think some of it is just because he passed away early? Like,
I think so. I think the same thing about Kurt Cobain though.
Yeah.
I think Nirvana is a good band. I really do. But I think they're also just as good as like Pearl Jam or like Queens of the Stone Age. Yeah. I think because he passed away so young, it's like almost like legend becomes, you get like, a little bit more famous. Like I think George Harrison's a better songwriter than John Lennon, but John Lennon's like because I think when he died prematurely, gives a little bit more credit. Yeah. Maybe that's really rude. Maybe that's the hot take. I don't know.
I'll say my next hot take is the Beatles are overrated, but
Kenny agrees with you there. We've argued about that one.
Yeah. My kids have listened to some of their stuff and which is just crazy because when I was a kid, like Beatles were basically Satan worshipers. Like I was raised in this
and now it's like bubblegum pop.
Exactly.
Cheesy music,
I was raised in ultra conservative. We talked about that. Dude, I still think about the story of your mom and the iPod like that.
Dude,
I've had
more comments of people who came up in our church and laughed so hard. Like, you did your mom so dirty. I don't think my mom listens to this podcast, but if she did, she'd be mortified. So nobody tell her.
Yeah. See, I think my mom listens to this. But this next one is funny. So we were in Israel, and my mom and Skip were watching our kids. And they were watching our dog too. And so our dog one day just started throwing up. And our dog, first of all, he's just the sweetest dog in the world. I love him. All right. So I love him, but he is like a little bit neurotic and he can get anxious and he'll throw up. So he threw up a few times. And so Nora texts me and says, he threw up. And I said, is anyone feeding him like different foods? Because we have a pretty strict diet that we give him. Long story short is Nora's like, well, sometimes grandma gives him a lot of wet food and a lot of treats. And so I was like,
that'd make me
this isn't our family text, just our family. So my mom's not included in it. As soon as Nora texted it, Titus just texts, it's just a picture of like an older lady and a bus, like the emojis, like you just threw grandma under the bus. And Nora did not get it. She's put like question mark. And I was just hoping he wouldn't explain it because they're infuriated because he just pushes her buttons and stuff.
Oh man.
So then I text my mom, I was like, hey, you gotta be careful with the wet food and stuff. And she's like, no, I don't give him that much. And so sometimes Nora can exaggerate stuff.
Titus is a savage. I'm gonna group text a savage for like a dumb phone video game. And he leads it and he is ruthless. That guy, he rules with an iron fist, man. I eat it up. My mom,
he listens to this, so he'll come in and comment.
Oh, sorry, buddy. Yeah, he's gonna come help me about it. Kenny somehow weaseled his way into my family's group text at one point. I think.
Wait, like what?
Like my personal, my mom, my dad,
Your
my
mom and
sisters.
dad, even better.
Oh man, was it funny? So it was Mary and his fault. Mary added him in as a joke, and he just like impersonated me, trying to trick my mom, thinking that like I have a new cell phone number. And so then I kept responding that I was, I'm like, I don't even know how I got to put this group text from my number. So we're just basically making fun of my mom, but then no one ever removed him for like 6 months. And I think eventually he left because he's like, I got kind of serious one day.
Yeah.
Felt bad.
Yeah. That's what you're
He's
like.
Hey, grandma needs prayer or something like that.
Yeah.
He's like, this feels, the joke is not funny anymore.
I just, going off on the whole thing here. I just saw this video where this guy, so this friend was sending out an invitation to this guy's bachelor party, like in a different state, New England area. I think they were going skiing or something like that. And he just typed in one letter wrong from the email address, and he sent it out. So this random guy gets it and just responds like, "Heck yeah, I'm in."
Nice.
And they were like, these guys responded, immediately realized by the way the guy worded it that this was not the right guy. So they like write back like, haha, it's so funny. But anyone that has that type of energy, you're invited. And he's like, I'm all in. He starts a GoFundMe page.
Dude,
like
no
it
way.
becomes such a funny story. He raises thousands of dollars. His whole trip is covered. When they get there, they get like deluxe car rentals because these other businesses are involved. People like sponsor them with like beer and stuff. It was just the funniest thing and he went there and met all these guys for the first time. They had this great weekend.
Dude, that's hilarious.
Things. That is funny.
That's
like
so,
if people
that's
do
super
stuff
cool.
like that.
That's like where humanity's winning, where it's like as
I know,
divisive and as crazy
exactly.
as things could be. All right, this is the last thing before I jump into the podcast. Made me think of it. You mentioned how he started a GoFundMe. I remember when GoFundMe, the website, first came out. There's a guy who started one that just said, "I'm making potato salad." Did you see this? He started, goes, "I'm making potato salad," with an unlimited cap for how much money he could raise. And he goes, "If I get a couple more bucks, like I'll use nicer ingredients." And he raised over $100,000 because GoFundMe was just becoming a thing, and people thought it was funny. So a bunch of people donated $5-10. And it was like a big moral issue of like, should you keep that money or like donate it? And he came out and he's like, 100% I'm keeping the money. Dude, what?
Why wouldn't he? I mean, he wasn't
like, it
doing
was a
anything
joke that went
deceptive.
viral. It's like, I didn't lie. I told people exactly what I was doing. I'm making potato salad. It's like,
People were giving to what he said.
100%. He goes, if I hit $1,000 and I'll live stream it, he goes the whole, oh man, that's just, I don't blame him. Like that's your own, if you're witty enough to have something go viral and you make money off of it, good for you, man.
Do you think GoFundMe oftentimes is misused? Do you ever see that?
Oh yeah.
Like
yeah,
I see
for
people
sure.
put GoFundMe stuff that I'm like,
the craziest
that's
stuff.
not a GoFundMe
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and I think there's something. It's such a vulnerable thing in general. Like anybody who's when you're seeing people misuse it, where you're asking for money for fill in the blank, whatever it is. I've seen it for like there's this pair of shoes I want to buy. I saw somebody from my high school share that, and I'm like, not the purpose for GoFundMe, dude. Like that's not. Well, but lo and behold, they'll have $10. I'm like, so somebody fell into it. Somebody was all in.
Yeah.
All right, so today we are talking about political ideology and specifically how there seems to be no center anymore.
Right.
So you shared a TikTok with me that showed, I don't remember what the company was. I can cite the source in the YouTube notes, whatever the case might be, if need be. But a specific company basically polled these senators from 1968 to 2021 is the latest data I think that he said he had about how they felt about certain issues, and then marked it of their opinion on it, how conservative it was or how progressive.
Yeah, let me correct you a little bit on
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
No, someone went back and looked at the voting records of senators.
Okay. So
in that time. So they were polled on it, but how they voted. And so like,
That makes more
and
sense.
then it put them on a scale of how liberal they were. And the guy was pointing out, he was like, this was to see how liberal they were. But by definition, if you reversed it, you would find how conservative they were. So it wasn't,
100%.
there was no like intent to prove good or bad.
There wasn't a bias to prove a point against one
so
party.
like if someone votes completely liberal and someone votes completely conservative, they're like, just flip it upside down and you can see. And so like you can finish, but like early on 64, people were like all over the place.
Yeah.
So like you saw all the dots that represented where each senator was.
There was something kind of beautiful about it. So
It was,
they had
100%
blue dots for Democrats, red dots for Republicans, and from the conservative, which is at the bottom, to liberal or progressive at the top. They were all over the place. There was some red all the way to the top.
It was an index, so like from 0 to 100%.
Absolutely, and it was littered with it. Some, both colors at the top, both colors at the bottom, all throughout the middle of it. So then they pulled up the same numbers from 21, as I think where I saw it ended, and it was like, I mean, almost like Moses parting the Red Sea, like unbelievable. All blue at the top, all red at the bottom, with maybe 4 or 5 dots somewhere in the middle, if that, and they were still kind of on their side, if that makes sense. There was nobody And it's
So what that means is, just to be clear, is people who are on the liberal side, almost all of the senators, like it was like all but one or two, 100% of the time voted straight liberal, and the conservatives, almost 100% of the time, besides one or two, voted 100% the party line. So both of them are party line, and there's now nothing in the middle. So the one graph was just dots everywhere of different colors. This graph was just basically two lines.
Which is just unbelievable. Which I don't know about you, but when I saw that, it made sense to me. Because even in my lifetime, I was born in the early 90s. I was born in 92. Even in that 30-year time, which maybe only 20 of which I actually even knew what politics was. Right. So in the last 20 years, it has felt more divided. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, yeah.
So for me...
Well, yeah, divided, but also just like militant, that you have to agree 100% of the time.
That's probably the better way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like when people say, oh, we're more divided than ever. I don't think that's true. Like, we had a civil war. Like historically.
Every time people say that,
it's like we've come through some colorful stuff for sure. But I think, so I know it's not more divided than ever, but I do feel like in my lifetime, there are things that feel, I'll even say there are things that have felt partisan, where when I was a kid, it did not feel like a partisan issue. I think a really easy example, and as I say this, I want to say this before I say it. I'm not trying to impart any opinion on this. It's an observation. So if you disagree with the observation, that's totally okay. I have noticed in my adult life, specifically in the last 5 years, vaccines were not politicized at all. Right, it was almost universally just like, oh, they're crunchy people or granola people who are anti, and then everybody else. And it wasn't even like, that was pretty much it. It didn't feel like it was a partisan issue.
Those who were against vaccines, that was almost a fringe group.
I agree.
It was, and a lot of it was associated with that false study on it causing autism that the one guy did.
I actually just talked about that with Isaac yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you had that little bit group, but I would say, and I'm not, again, don't read too much into this or whatever, but I would say more people thought, those who went against those vaccines, people thought like they might be the goofy ones or whatever.
Exactly.
It was kind of like,
it felt like a fringe group.
Yeah.
Whether right or wrong, they were on the outside of like the popular opinion, and now it's not only a part of popular opinion about like big opinions about vaccines. It's a partisan issue. It's seemingly not 100%, but it seems to be trending that way.
Right. Yeah.
I would say the same thing about racism, where when I was a kid, specifically in the church, like you don't be racist, and it was something like, you should never be racist. It wasn't a talking point. It wasn't something, and if a black person would tell you I had this racist act against me, usually the answer would have been like, I'm sorry. Like, is there anything I can do to help? Now, all of a sudden, since the Black Lives Matter movement, it's felt politicized. It felt like progressive people put their flag in it. Like, this is our thing. This is our hill to die on, is racial justice, social justice. And in response, not even necessarily from a value standpoint, in response, it feels like many people on the other side of the aisle were just like, hey, America, you're disrespecting this country that my grandfather died for. I'm like, this is an equal opportunity country. And it felt like racism became kind of partisan. Vaccines became partisan. I feel like we've seen things that in my life were not usually this so aggressively here or here. And then it's almost like clever branding. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it feels like Republicans did a great job of cornering the market on pro-life. And then liberals were like, I'm going to corner the market on pro-choice. And now they just like, I don't want to call it virtue signaling because I don't want to like assume their actual intent. But it seems like that at times where it's like, man, they certainly pick their side, and it's everything. It feels like it happens with everything now. I don't know. Have you felt that change, or as someone who's older than me, has it always been that way? And I just woke up to it one day.
No, 100%. And I would actually say, like what you just said is how I've processed this issue. So again, I'm going to pause real quick. I don't need to say this every single time. You and I, we pick a topic and then we don't talk about it till we get in this room. Okay, so like this is just how the process works. So we're trying to figure it out. You have jumped to the end conclusion of where my mind went when I saw that TikTok. As I was looking at it and I was going, all right, why is that a bad thing? Because the video that we watched wasn't so much the person just saying, he wasn't really even saying this is evil.
It seemed pretty amoral. He's just like,
he's like, my father was a professor who taught these things. This is a study that they did, and here's the facts. But I was like, why is that so tough? And the reason is I think like there's like this, there's all these like cause and effect things that happen. So give me a second to kind of try to explain my thought and see if it connects.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was thinking about it and I was like, here's one of the weird things that's happened is our political system has now informed a nation of how to think and how to treat different topics and how to process information that once could have been a discussion and or a disagreement. So what has happened is it's like this really weird dynamic is the political parties used to be able to discuss things. People could decide. You didn't have to fall in one or the other on every single issue.
Can I interject there real quick before you continue? Did you see that clip? It recently went viral on TikTok of John McCain talking about President Obama. Came across my feed a couple of days ago, but you might remember what I'm talking about. But a lady grabs a microphone and goes, "I don't trust Obama. I think he's an Arab." I think he grabs a microphone and he goes, "No. Like, he's a great man. He's a family man. We happen to disagree on a lot." And then he went into those disagreements.
I have seen that clip, but okay, yeah.
So that's good. We're going. That is where I feel like when you said that is what it made me think of. There was a time where it felt like there was more peace about it. It wasn't so volatile. You know what I mean?
But even then, like if you take that example, so like at the end, President Obama spoke at McCain's funeral and did a beautiful job. And people used that to shame McCain. Like they were like, see, like a Democrat president speaks highly of you. That means you obviously were on their side. Yeah. And it's really weird. Like a picture I shared years ago on my social media, which now this is a good example. I would never share this just because I wouldn't want the headache of it. Years ago, I saw this picture where President George W. Bush is laughing with Hillary Clinton, and she's like leaning on him. I don't know what the event was, but they're laughing, and she's like leaning on him, and it's like this super touching picture. Yeah. And President George W. Bush is like really good friends with Michelle Obama because of social protocol. They always have to sit next to each other from where he was former president and then sits next to the first lady at the time, current first lady. So they sit next to each other. So like they've developed this friendship. He brings her, keeps bringing her candy that has from the White House, which is obviously expired, but he keeps bringing it to her. It's just like their joke.
Like anyway, every year that he does, it gets more aggressively expired.
Right, exactly. But even with that, like, when I first posted that picture, there were people who were like, I still don't like her. And I'm like, you're missing the picture. Like that there has to be some respect. So all that said, okay. So this political system, I'm going to try to explain this quickly as I can.
Sure.
So this political system decided, like, I'm going to start off with an assumption. Here's the assumption I'm starting with. That people in the political positions don't actually think 100% in agreement with their political party. Like, isn't that a safe assumption? What are the chances of one person agreeing 100% of the time and then multiplying that basically 50-50? So like, 100 senators on one side, because I think, wasn't there 200 senators? Right, no, there's 100 senators, 2 per state. Yeah. So 50 one side, 50 the other. Like, you look at that and you go, what are the chances? There's not a chance in the world. So they're making a decision to vote that way because of something else. And the something else, and we can go deeper into that. The something else is we have a political system where there's the party and a select group get to choose who is the primary candidate to run for a position, who's the one who gets the support, the expertise, the funding. And so like this small group gets to decide who's going to be the next elected official. And so like they have to befriend them, then they have to fall in line with the political party. And then once you get in power, in order to stay in power, you still need that organization and that support. Yeah. So you have to constantly compromise. Here's my assumption is people go into it with a pure heart of, most people that go into a pure heart of thinking like, I can make a difference. Yeah. I want to make a difference. And then they get sucked into the system. Okay, so the political party then, they all vote that way. So now if I want to associate with the party, it looks like in order to agree with this party, I have to follow my congressmen and women. Yeah. So I have to support them. So I have to be this way. So now all of a sudden everyone's militant. And here's the weird thing. They create this like the system, and they've created it where this is the standard. And so then if they compromise that standard, it's the very people they've trained to think this way who criticize them. Yeah. And now in a culture of like nonstop open information, people expose you on social media. So if you think about it, if you're a congressman and you vote one time with the other party, it is your own party who eats you alive. Yeah. Right.
Ironically. Yeah.
Ironically. Okay. So in this system now, like it's like the self-perpetuating system. What then happens with that is what I think you're talking about is it's become to this point of like, it's every issue now has to fall on one side because the party has to decide not like, where do I stand on this? It's where do we stand on this issue? Yeah. So like, I'm a Republican first. I'm not a free thinker first. Yeah. I'm a Republican first, or I'm a Democrat first. And so now with this issue, they tell me how I'm going to think. And that's a part of it that's so sad to me. I'm sure we're going to discuss this, but that's a part that's so sad to me is I'm looking to them, saying to them, tell me how to think about this. Because there's a lot of issues that do not line up. If you actually look at it logically, you're like, these issues shouldn't line up with your party.
Which is hilarious.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
But it just has. And so like they were like, okay, so how should I think? And that's where we're at right now. Yeah. So all these other issues have become politicized. So it's like now it's, wait a second, I used to not have a strong opinion about vaccines. Now I feel like I have to,
or else I feel like I'm uneducated, or I feel like I'm not backing. Exactly. And there are people who are still really passionate about. My mom told me this growing up, and she since then would not agree with this, right? But I remember her specifically telling me when I was a kid, where she's like, it was a value system. Like, can't be wishy-washy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you got to stand for something. Like, are you going to stand with this or against this? And it just felt like almost like a very patriotic thing. Like, if you're going to be a Republican, like, you got to have some backbone to it. Which on paper, like, you know, like, I get it. I'm like, yeah, like, I want to have a strong mind. You know what I mean? I want to ask you, why is this a bad thing? Like, where does this fall apart and hurt us as citizens? And if that's what you believe, I don't know. But before we do, I think it's even worth saying what a Republican is and what a Democrat is to understand why I think this is kind of silly, right?
Yeah.
What we're talking about Republicans and Democrats, is they feel like when you hear them communicate, you would think that they are a different species sometimes, how
100%.
aggressively they talk to each other. And I think we know why. Me and you were talking recently about a video that we both saw where a politician was explaining when the cameras are on in Congress, people are more aggressive, they're louder, they're more extreme, because then the news picks them up. It garners more base from angry people who then identify with their anger. And then when the cameras are off, they're actually way more chill, right? So we see people getting more involved on their opinions and more intense, and at times almost feels like children arguing. And it's like, you guys are adults and you're leading our country. What's going on? And here's why I think it's extra silly. They're both doing the same thing. So if you talk about the nature of Republican and Democrat, they both just want to make America better, safer, more prosperous. Safer for everybody involved, better for every type of citizen, and more prosperous. Democrats generally believe in a lot of social safety nets and like supporting up people and making sure that everybody has an equal shot. They believe in equity, even giving, sometimes affirmative action, giving more people more to try to help them catch up. But really the whole point is to try to elevate people up and to lift people up, to take care of laborers. That's famously what they're, the labor part is famously what they're for, right? Republicans are all about the biggest thing that we can protect is our own individual freedom. And that comes with personal responsibility. And that comes with upholding those responsibilities. And we take that super seriously. And then it's your individual responsibility as an American citizen to lift people up. Your job is to do that. It's the same thing. It's a different approach.
Right.
So this is where I get so frustrated, is that you're literally talking about care, which as a pastor, I'm profoundly passionate about. Like, care is one of the largest responsibilities we have as a church, maybe even the largest, outside of like pointing people to Jesus, is care. Politicians, it should be that. Their responsibility is care and lifting people up. They both have different ways to approach it. And that's what made me think that John McCain thing, where he's like, no, we happen to disagree, but I'm not going to sit here and demonize him. But for people who are objectively trying to accomplish the same thing, for the amount of hate and vitriol that they talk to each other, and then the way that the people who follow them, just us as citizens, then attack each other on the internet, and the way how volatile we are about it, it feels kind of comical to me. Yeah. So I want to hear what you think about how aggressive things have gotten, how there's no middle anymore. But I just think before we even get into that, it's worth saying, like, the goal is the same. Would you say that's fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you can demonize, and that's the problem with it is I would say you and I, what we just said, we agree on that we do think they both have ultimately the same goal. But I would think if you talk to the people on the extreme of either side, they would say they don't have the goal to make America better. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, they do.
They 100% do.
They do.
Now,
they just have a completely different strategy.
I'm sure some politicians are corrupt, but assuming, if we're just talking philosophy, talk about the philosophy of a conservative, the philosophy of a progressive or a liberal. The philosophy is to make people better.
Right.
Just different strategies.
So I remember when Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, passed away. I'm almost positive that's his name. Sorry. Anyway, is it Ted Kennedy? So there's.
I'm bad at it. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's Ted Kennedy.
That sounds right.
Anyway, when he passed away, so he's a pretty polarizing figure. I mean, first of all, like, there's stuff in his past that he was involved with, he was just kind of demonized for a long time. He's real liberal and stuff like that. But I remember when he died, there were multiple senators, even from the Republican side, that were like, this guy 100% wanted to make America better. Like, he was had this deep conviction of these things needed to happen for America to be better. And I remember even like in my own mind prior to that, just kind of saw him, like, there was something just shady it felt about because of his past and different things, like the Kennedy name and all the different things. Yeah. And yet to hear these people talk about him going like, no, he 100%. And I remember just going like, yeah, I can see it. I can see these senators, they just have a different strategy, but yeah, I agree.
So why do they hate each other? Like as someone who has seen this transition of where it felt like a little bit more nonpartisan to now it's like, no, we're talking about people who literally, remember when they were trying to vote in?
I don't think they do hate each other. So, okay. All right. So you and I, there's this guy that we really like. I'm not going to say his name right now, but there's a guy we really like on TikTok that he is a Democrat, but he's a new congressman. He does these videos where he just explains stuff. He's like an incredible communicator. He's real chill. He lets you know on the behind the scenes type of things. And one of the things that you just referenced, but he also had another video that was similar. He said, like, there's this one politician that specifically, he just thought in his mind, I will never get along with this guy because he's just so aggressive. He's so all these things. And he goes, and I met him personally, and I realized this guy is brilliant. So this is a Democrat talking about a Republican. He's like, he is brilliant. The stuff he talks about. Okay, then the second video that we were just talking about, where he goes, the lights go off, and these people are completely different.
It's crazy.
Because they have to. I'm convinced this political group, Republicans and Democrats, are playing the nation for fools. And I think they know if they can keep everyone divided, then they can dictate to the political parties what you're going to think, and they can control their minds and values. And what it does is it keeps them in power. So like that's the part of it that's so sad is I actually don't think as a whole Congress itself is as divided as they let on, because this guy is saying it. The congressman behind the scene is like, no, behind the scenes, we're getting along.
And it feels like if he goes missing at some point, it's not going to be that surprising. Like, that's how transparent his content is.
His stuff is great.
Yeah, man, he's really calling some stuff out.
But just think about it, though.
Yeah.
So if they're getting along and the nation is following a caricature of what's really going on, and the nation is falling for it. And I think that's the tension that we feel. So like when I see that, I go, this is so frustrating to me, because it's training, and this is a consistent theme that we talk about on this podcast, but it's training a nation to not have open minds about truth, about information, because you're just sitting there going like, feed me, tell me what I should think, and then I'm going to do it. And I think that's what's so sad and so dangerous. And people
just follow suit. And like I see people that like, you know, I'll speak. We've spoken about racism on this podcast, I think, twice now, but that's an easier example for me because it's something I personally care about. And I've even talked about the reasons why on that too. But like when you see people that I know their character, I know them individually, I know how generous they are. And to see people all of a sudden get very angry at the idea that racism might still be prevalent in whatever form, get frustrated at that, it's always shocking to me, because at first I was like, I know you're a great guy. You're a great girl. Like I know you as a human. You're caring, you're empathetic. If I asked you for the shirt off your back, you'd probably give it to me. Right. Why does the care stop at this issue? And then it just kind of hit me. It's because we're just following suit. Yeah. We don't usually go into this.
Hold on. What were you just talking about though? You're saying that people are tired of having the concept of race being challenged in racism. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So it seemed like when the Black Lives Matter movement like really blew up, it felt like people were frustrated on having to confront racism. So people that I know who are empathetic would say like, racism isn't prevalent. It doesn't even exist. Yeah. It's like, well, when you have a black person saying, I've had a racist experience, usually you wouldn't disqualify that and say, no, you haven't. You would try to validate them.
Now you feel like you have to, because
and now you feel like you have to.
You're either this or that.
100%.
There's nothing
You've bought into the lie that if you're progressive now, you go to the other extreme and say all white people are racist.
So
if you're conservative, you say it's not even real.
So like I'm 100% pro police officers in the sense of I want to support them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to protect them and all that. Okay. I also want accountability. And I remember like at times when it's like in this mindset, either you're for police or you're against them. And
we've had people say that to us as well.
I've had it. People get mad. And there was even a rumor at one time, I probably shouldn't bring this up, but during COVID, because I made just some statements about there's a rumor that like I didn't support emergency responders. And I was like, what?
How do you get there?
And everyone that knew me was like, that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard. But it was because like you go, you know what? I can support police and still call for accountability. So 100%. Like even on TikTok, there's a bunch of pages that I follow that are all like police stops. And actually I have to I'm starting to like watch less and less of them because they get me fired up. But I would say 75%, I'm just making up numbers here, but 75% of them are idiots getting pulled over. Like they're trying to be tough guys with
needlessly
police officers.
Being rude, trying to catch somebody. Yeah,
they're trying to bait them, and it's so annoying. But I'll have to admit, there are a handful where cops are they're on power trips, and cops come and like they're immediately like yelling at guys, throwing guys to the ground, just not feeling like the law applies to them. So you look at it and you go, a person can look at it and go, yeah, those cops need to be fired. There needs to be accountability. This might be a common problem that this position can have. That doesn't mean you're not supporting, but in our culture, it does. In our culture, we have to ignore it. So I'll tell you where this is like super embarrassing for us as Christians is when the Republican Party, where people were condoning President Trump's behavior, even like big names, were condoning his behavior and saying things like about him in the positive, looking past his just horrible things he was doing. because in their mind, we're either for him or we're against him.
Yeah.
So those same people who would use words to destroy President Clinton and his sinful behavior looked at Trump and gave him grace because he's on their side.
And then try to excuse it away.
Try to excuse it away. And I remember just as a Christian being so embarrassed to go, guys, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm super disappointed that our president just did that.
Yeah.
Like that was
doesn't make you un-American. It doesn't make you not a conservative anymore. Because I think that's the fear. I think people have bought into the lie that if I were to take a stand against this behavior that a politician that's in my party were to do, if you were to say something about it, then all of a sudden you're a traitor, or you're not, or you're not patriotic, or now all of a sudden it means I'm condoning. Let's say if you're conservative, now I'm condoning the pro-choice Democrats. So I think are trying to, and I understand the fear. Okay, so here's an example. It isn't political, but I think it's interesting either way. I won't say what company, but my dad, when I was a kid, got just kind of worked at dead-end jobs until all of a sudden he got a good job at a car manufacturer. In I'm not going to say where. So he got a job for a car manufacturer. Quickly, my dad's a socially funny guy, worked his way up to become a union steward. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like a lawyer for the union. So like not an actual lawyer, but let's say if you did something wrong on the job, his job would be to defend you so you don't lose your job. It's to defend people in the union because you don't want union guys losing their job. That's why they exist. Super cool. I love unions. You and I have talked about this before. I like unions. Here's where it gets a little shifty, right? My dad would have to go to bat for people that he knew were 100% wrong. Yeah. 100% wrong. And he's like, this guy did exactly that. But if I don't go to bat for this person, I won't get elected as union steward, and I make $20,000 less next year and I'd go back to the stamping line. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the problem with identity politics, or the idea of getting too deep into one side. It's like, if I don't go on this side, then I'm betraying this side. Then all of a sudden I feel like, and you just are stuck having to buy into stuff. And then all of a sudden I have to think that people would find themselves looking at the things that they say, and I wonder if they ever feel like, do I actually even believe that? You know what I mean? Right, but you're in too deep at that point. Yeah. Like my dad knowingly knew I have to make compromises if I'm going to take this job. I have to defend people I know are guilty. I'm sure being a lawyer is probably the same. Like a public defendant, my goodness, you know. And I understand there are times where the pros outweigh the cons. I'm not trying to make a morality statement about that. I don't understand enough about that world. But I think that's how people fall into that trap of just like so aggressively believing one thing or the other. And here's like, it's going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it's that crazy.
Mm-hmm. I love conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I think that if you put a bunch of billionaires in a room that are white, black, Muslim, Christian, I just feel like they'd probably be fine. Like I feel like they'd probably get along. Yep. These people probably work together. You know what I mean? They probably rubbed elbows, probably make decisions. Famously, this is where it's kind of conspiracy because it's like a private club in Northern California where a bunch of old presidents and rich people hang out every summer. And it's just like a private country club type. I forget what it's called. And it's like, these people, they're homies. They know each other. They're tight with each other. And you know who hate each other? All the people who admire them. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're talking like there are pictures of Ronald Reagan there with I forget who, but it was different people who in theory should hate each other, and all of their followers who hate each other. When those people themselves, it's what that congressman was saying that we saw on TikTok, is like they're not that bad when the lights are off. The lights are off. A lot of them are friends because the conspiracy theory is that people in power, not even just congressmen. The fact is, what do we know? Lobbying is legal in this country, which means all these congressmen, the one that we like famously said, I never will, right? Take money from super PACs, from private companies, everything from oil to pharma, to Black Lives Matter, to the NRA, they're taking money from all these places. Whoever owns that stuff, which we oftentimes don't know their names, they're all fine with each other. Yeah. It feels like they own the news networks and they own the politicians, and they want to keep everybody resentful to each other, hateful to each other, more aggressively. This problem that we're talking about, this massive like Red Sea split in the middle of red and blue, they want to keep that as big as possible because unified people usually can work together to maybe create change that they wouldn't like. That's my conspiracy theory.
No, but that's 100% what I agree with. So what I was saying earlier is so the way that the system is set up that I think is so damaging is you have, so I'm going to repeat some things I've already said, but if I want to get elected to a position, a seat, I have to go to a political party because they're determining who gets to run in the primaries. So that's just the initial election. So this group is deciding who gets to run. In order to run, I have to convince this group that I'm going to walk the party line. Okay. So they give me money, they give me expertise, like all the connection points and stuff, all the support that I need. They get me elected. Now I owe them, and I want to stay in power, and I need all of those things to get reelected. So in order to stay in power, I have to keep making this group happy. Okay. So just this group, I'm gonna use that phrase. So this group happy. So now, like everyone on the party line is trying to make this group happy. Everyone in this party line is trying to make this group happy. Now, all the political system is training our nation how to think, because you have to fall in one or the other.
Yeah.
And where are they getting most of their information from? They're getting most of their information from a news source that their whole point is, in order to get you to watch our thing, because we want to make money, we have to make everything more dramatic than it actually is.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And so they have to, like, if it bleeds, it leads, like that whole concept. And so they want to show like the world's in the disarray, that the political system's broken. So they're manipulating people with their information. None of it is just information. There's all an editorial to it now. There's all a manipulation. There's a strategy to it. And so to get you to keep watching. So then that one congressman just said, why people act like these congressmen act so demonstrative and so dramatic is because they know if they don't, they won't get airtime. And if they don't get airtime, it will hurt them when they want to get reelected. So they have to act that way to get airtime, to manipulate the people. Okay. So again, so here's what I'm saying.
What a toxic system. Jeez.
So this group that's in power, that's choosing who gets elected, this group who's in power, that's choosing the message, is friends with this group who owns the political system. So again, they're all having the same country club. I know it sounds like conspiracy theory, but it's not. I mean, like when they're all getting together. So the people at the top, they're okay to work together, even if they disagree. That's the thing about people who want to make money. Actually, a lot of people, they can disagree, but it doesn't matter. We have the ultimate goal. We want to make money. So in order to make money, we got to work together. And like, there is that element. And that's what's so frustrating, is the people at the top are acting a certain way, and they're playing everybody for fools. Yeah. And so that's the part of it where I'm just like, everyone has to just take a step back and chill and start to be open thinkers again, where you have to develop a rhythm where, like, this is what I hate in our culture. It's like, you either, this rhythm of like all or nothing. So like, I have to either agree 100% or I have to disagree 100%. There's like no nuance. And we have to take a step back and start looking at everything and going, you know what? I might have a different opinion, and that's okay. There might be a little bit of nuance to this.
Yeah, I was joking around with a friend, with my friend Kenny a couple days ago. He works here at the Tree. And I may have told you this joke too, but like, I want to be known as like an aggressive centrist. To be like, you know how people be really militarized on one side of like, and if you don't like it, you can get out of my country. Or if you don't like it, you can go. People are so mean. I want to be like, if you can't see nuanced, you can go. Like, I want to be so like aggressively empathetic and trying to understand why people are acting the way they are, why they think the way they do. Can I see nuance in it? And it's just, the older I get and the more I fall in love with that idea, honestly, the harder it is to have conversations with people who are not on that same page. Yeah. How often do you see somebody who is like aggressively on one side of that, where you're just like, I don't really want to have a conversation with you about this right now. Oh, because you know they're lost. You know they're in too deep. It's just like, that's not a fun conversation. That person has never been the life of the party. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to, because it's tough. And when you see somebody so entrenched, they're not taking in new stuff. That really is the whole spirit of this podcast, right? Is, you know, that's those. So
here, I would even push back on you though. You just said you want to be a centrist. Here's what's funny. I don't want to be a centrist. So,
okay, what do you want to be? What's the alternative? Because when I think centrist, I think nuance. I guess maybe that's where it seems romantic in my mind.
Let me tell you my opinion. You can push back on it.
Sure.
I'm probably more conservative than people even realize. Like, I'm extreme conservative. That's my value system, not just theologically, but I would even say like politically. Like, I just think it makes more sense to me. Sure. So I am militant conservative. I think I'm more conservative than our actual conservative party nowadays. I think like the Republicans say small government, and they keep increasing the size of the government. I agree with that. There's a lot of hypocritical things. So I'm really conservative. So I'm militant that way, but I want to be a militant conservative with an open mind. Like, if that sounds like a contradiction. No, I think that's fair. I'm really passionate about these ideas with the mindset, I could be wrong, with the mindset that there's some nuance to it. And so like the example that I give, and I've used this before, and I have to apologize because I haven't changed my mind on a lot of issues politically over the years. And so like, I don't have a lot of examples. But I was really militant against the idea of universal health care. I just thought like, because I just think we don't need bigger government. The government's never been good at like monitoring stuff and running stuff and all that. Okay. I read every single president's autobiography or memoirs when they're done. I find it fascinating. I like to learn about leadership. So I read President Obama's. And in there, when he explained his thought process of like, when a country gets to a certain point, they just start offering services that become standardized. Like you just expect there to be police, you expect there to be fire, you expect there to be ambulances, you expect there to be hospitals.
And we can't imagine our government getting rid of the fire department, like federally funded
and
fire.
he said, you get to a point, there should be universal health care. Yeah. And it's as simple as that. He said it, and I went, I agree.
Yeah, sure.
And so in my mind, I'm still militant conservative, but I can see that logic. I can see that logic with a nation that is more prosperous than any nation in the history of the world should be able to offer. And when people use phrases like, it's a human right, you go, you know what? I don't know that's a human right in the sense that like you're entitled to it.
If you're in war-torn Uganda, they're not. It's not because
it's just
not
not
available.
an option. It's not available.
So how do you call it a human right?
So I look at it and say it's not a human right per se, but it should be an expectation that if you're able to help people in need, absolutely. Yeah, so it is a gift that we can offer people of like all people should be covered that way. And I knew that there were some systems in place, like hospitals wouldn't refuse you if you went in.
Sure.
But it adds a certain level of stress. So all that said, it's like that was one issue that I go, you know what? I'm still fairly militant on the conservative side of like I have these deep convictions. But I also think there has to be some nuance to it.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm very similar to you, but on the other side of the aisle, literally, right? So I've been more progressive for most of my adult life, especially probably when I went to college is where I started to like think a little bit different than how you grew up. And I think it started as more classic like rebellion. Like my parents are Republicans, so I'm a Democrat. Like you know what I mean? Like just
that's kind of your history.
Stick it to the man. Yeah, I've got a trouble spot with authority sometimes, but so going from that, like then I moved to San Diego, which is a very liberal place just in general, right? So you're surrounded by that. And you know what's even funny? When I lived in San Diego, which is generally a little bit more of a conservative part of California because the money is just through the roof. So anytime you meet a lot of rich people, there's a lot of, especially out there, the secret conservatives. They're like, they don't like taxes, but they want to pretend to be like, I'm a cool liberal, but really they have tax shelters. They're not paying their taxes, right? But I was in San Diego, you would talk to Christians who would almost say, obviously, the Christian response is to be a Democrat, where they would be like, well, it's because social equity and like care and like homelessness and poverty and the widow and the orphan. And then when you come to Ohio, it's like, well, obviously, if I'm a Christian, I'm a Republican because, pro-life, like, family values, conservative family values, just like, financial stewardship, all these things that God's called us to do. And to me, I just thought that was so funny. But historically, I've usually leaned left on stuff. But where I started to have a really open hand, the first time I felt it, where I kind of walked away from the partisan model, was with gun control. Mm-hmm. So me and you had a very specific talk where I don't remember what it was. I want to say it was the big shooting that happened in Paris, or maybe it wasn't that happened in Florida. I don't remember. But I was getting ready to have a kid, right? And it just hit a little different, like the thought of gun control. Pre that moment, I would have literally said this to you about guns. I would have said, I just don't think anything holy. I've said this, like, I don't think anything holy could come out of an end of a gun. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't think it's Christ-like. Swords into plowshares, the whole thing. I felt very enlightened about it, right? Then all of a sudden I'm about to have a kid, and I'm like, maybe there's some, maybe there's some points. You remember me talking about this?
I want to say though, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you had a false alarm, but you thought someone was breaking into your house.
That's exactly what it was.
And then you went. All of a sudden you went, I realized I'm not equipped.
I am the only person standing between myself and my pregnant wife. It is just me.
Right.
And if that person has a gun, I am not equipped for the situation. And at that point, it stopped being about political ideology and it started being about...
Yeah, I remember when you came in because I was like, tell me more.
You think so? But I remember that fear of just like it became a stewardship question in my head. So now... my beliefs about guns are like I'm very pro Second Amendment. If you want a gun, you should have a gun. I believe that there are some. We can talk about this some other time if we want to. Yeah. Some
it
things
really
around.
A podcast we should do. It's always one of the possible topics.
Yeah.
We never pull the trigger. Pun intended.
Yeah. but I changed my mind on it. Where it was just like because I never want to be so closed-minded. I'm like, nope, because I'm a Democrat or because I'm a progressive. And then over time, once you do that, all of a sudden it becomes so liberating. So okay, here's like a small sidebar of how I think. Here's the way a healthy human should handle it. If I would have done that and changed my mind and come and talk to you and Kenny, another friend who I respect, who has a gun, who has like concealed carry, which it doesn't really matter now, but like all that stuff. Right. If you guys would have met me with like, that's right, idiot, then it would have de-incentivized me to change my mind. Yeah. So I think because I'm surrounded by people who encourage, and you do this really well for people who work on staff, I've been in meetings with you where I'm like so sure you'll come in, not hot as in disrespectful, but passionate. Like, I think this is not what we're going to do. I think it's a bad idea. And then I'll just see your mind slowly change over a meeting. Like, okay, I think that's a better idea. There's so much power in that. And so I guess my sidebar is Be the kind of person that there's safety in people changing their minds, or else you're just a part of this partisan problem. Like, you're a part of the militant right and left. It is your fault. Like, singularly, you are a part of the massive problem. Celebrate when people, because like if I would have said I'm changing my mind on guns, and you'd have been like, well, it's because you were dumb before and now you're smarter. I would have been like, well, I'm not going to, now I want to go back to that side. Like, no, you know, celebrate people changing their minds. Then there's more safety in that open-mindedness. The more things you change, it becomes less threatening. I'm not embarrassed if I change my mind. I'm not embarrassed if I say, I'm kind of believe something more conservative about this, something more progressive on this. There's so much safety in just not holding on to it that close. And you know what I mean?
100%. Yeah. And I think that's the part in our cancel culture that we have is we want everyone to have it all figured out in an early age and never change their minds. And again, I think that's just so lazy. It's intellectually lazy. And I think, okay, so one of you and I, Enneagram 8s, one of our things that fire us up is whenever we feel like someone's trying to manipulate or control us. And that's what there's a part of in both of us that I think, oh, you want to tell me how to think? Like, no. And so I think it's so empowering and freeing, though, to just go, you know what? I don't have to be put into a box in any way. And that's why
the need to.
I'm not threatened when people have different ideas than me. Like, you can have a different theological bent than me. There's a few things that there's some other consequences from it. So like there are some things, there are like a handful of theological things we need to basically have the same belief on because we're Christians and like the Bible's super clear on these things. But there's a lot of others that I'm like, it's okay to have different opinions. And yet, like we see it even in the church world, there's like, and this is becoming less and less a thing, but it's like, you know, you have to fall into this denomination. So you have to be a Methodist, a Lutheran, a Presbyterian, a Pentecostal, whatever it might be. And like, I never fit in that either because that's one thing I didn't like growing up. I was raised in the Assemblies of God, and they had it boiled down to 16 fundamentals of truth. And the 16 fundamentals of truth were not fundamentals of truth. They were not fundamental.
Because if they were, they wouldn't be according to your denomination. It would be fundamental across faith. Which is not.
You're right. And they had some things, I would say there's like seven or eight that I was like, these 7 or 8 you can find in every Christian denomination. So that's the fundamentals of faith. There's not these other 6 or 7. You're like, these are your opinion. I can see why it's your opinion. I might even agree with it. But to say it's fundamental, like, that's to say, like, no, these are foundational, these are clear, these are not debatable. And that's what I don't like in any form of thought process is to say, we have to believe in these things in order for us to be in a relationship when there's so few things that I think are black and white like that.
And I want to dig a little bit deeper into cancel culture just for a second. Just when you mentioned that's the problem with cancel culture. For some reason, politically, people are panned for what's called like a flip-flopper. You know, like me and you have personally talked about this a lot. I don't know if you've ever done it in a podcast, but it's like when you change your mind on something, you're just like destroyed. Where it's like, oh, that person's inconsistent. Where it's like, I'm sorry, if you haven't changed your mind on something in a long time, you're now not qualified to me anymore. Because nobody's ever just gotten it right when they're 20 and like nailed it and had never had to readjust or change a philosophy or have a new opinion. It's just not realistic. Where for me, it's like I'm way more interested in somebody who researched, read a book and said, oh, I'm thinking about that differently now. That to me is like, that's powerful. You know?
I love it.
And those are the kind of
I
politicians
respect the person more that changes their mind after careful consideration than I would a person who just says, like, I have believed these things and I'm never going to change my mind. Like I go like, oh, okay. Like you just don't impress me. It just doesn't.
And I can get how wishy-washy is bad in the sense that every time you have a conversation, if you change your mind, it's like, well, you probably just didn't, you need to maybe read a little bit more and have your own opinion about stuff.
But wishy-washy in my mind is going back and forth on the same topic, you know, like to me where you're like,
or it's because you're socially malleable, right? So to fit in, you'll shift and be like, oh, I agree with that. When then if you're with a different party the next day, oh, I agree with that. That to me is a little bit more like, I don't admire that as much, but honestly, I'd still rather have that than someone who's so militantly like, I've never changed my mind. Like these are like the 5 things that I agree with my whole life.
And chances are, if you're so militant about one side or the other, the truth of it, and people won't like this, probably a lot of your thought is not your independent thought. It's not that you came to that conclusion on your own. So you really are being controlled and manipulated. And that's another part that I don't love. Like to me, that's so empowering is to even look at the side that I lean, look at it, and then to identify in their communication the things that I look at and go, oh, that's disingenuous. Oh, that's not correct. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I do this in theology and in politics where I'm looking at someone and I see them make an argument and I'm going, oh, that's a weak argument. And you know that's a weak argument. You know what I mean? Like you're just saying that because you can't admit that this is a hole in my belief system.
Yeah.
And so I like listening and engaging and reading the people who go, these are the things that make me feel this way. Here are the questions that I can see why people believe that. You know what I mean? Like, whereas then there are the other ones that are like, nope, like there's no possibility. Like I just saw a pastor, a famous pastor. He said this person talked about how they believed like this person and they went away from it. And so his response to them is like, they basically should just shut up and listen to me because I've studied this for 50 years and I'm right. That's literally like what they said.
Dang.
You could guess this pastor, but and so he said it, and I just saw it like that. And there are people who applaud it. Oh, he's
way to stand for the truth. He's got a backbone. Like what a strong leader. Yeah.
What a prideful and just silly response to say I've studied something for 50 years. And on the other side of this argument, there are people who have been studying it for hundreds of years who fall on the other side.
Yeah.
So like to take that
brilliant people too.
Brilliant people. Yeah. So that's the thing of it. Again, I just want to always encourage people, like, take a step back and try to find, I would say this in politics, try to find how your political party is controlling you and manipulating you. Like there's something empowering in that to go, you know what? Like, oh, I see it now. I see it in news and like I see it in Fox. I see it in CNN. I see it in this and that. And then you can take a step back.
Yeah, and I think that sets you in a place where, again, you no longer have to be afraid to admit that there's bias. You don't have to be embarrassed to admit that you're wrong because it's just it's a part of your life now. It's just like, well, I do recognize that like that was always such a red flag for me. I talked to whoever, fill in the blank. Be like, well, I think that, MSNBC and CNN are biased, but I don't think Fox is, or I think Fox is awful, but I think CNN's pretty even keeled. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, we all know that that's not true.
Not true, right?
Of course, that's not true.
Like Saturday Night Live knows that's not true.
Oh, for sure. It's like, but how? And I just never want to delude myself enough or to lie to myself enough to fall into that trap. Like I want to be an independent thinker. You kind of answered this already, but my final question was like, but I guess I want to give it to you as an opportunity if you have anything else you want to say on the topic.
Yeah.
What is your advice to, and it could be the same answer, to a citizen, like you as an American citizen, and a Christian on this issue? Like if you were to give someone, like you have a shot to tell someone, here's how you can handle this pretty devastating issue, what would you tell them?
I would always, so we have said this theme, like it's like the underline of this podcast is continue to take in new information. So I think when you allow a political party or just a party in general, so like a political party, a theological group, when you allow one side to be able to tell you how to think, you're just in a I think an intellectually weak position.
Yeah, I agree.
You should just have an open mind. You should be taking in new information. You should try to find people who are communicating the other person or the other group's side or the other side of wherever you fall in a way that isn't charged, that you can learn from it, because it helps you become more safe and more nuanced in your thinking. Yeah. And I think that's just like a better way to live. So like, let's go back to where we started. So you introduced us and you started talking about how all the topics have been politicized. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about vaccines for a moment. Okay, so pre-COVID, the argument was, does vaccines cause autism? That was basically the major objections, right? That was the big one. So that was somewhat of a subgroup, and it was a small minority, and there was like a lot of people really didn't educate themselves on that. Okay, so there was a part of that, and that is what it was. Okay, then COVID comes, and now because it's politicized, it just split our nation into two sides. But here's the danger of it. Okay, so the one side, the conservative side, basically became like anti-vaccine. Yeah. The liberal side became so pro-vaccine that it's like we can't question anything.
Cancel people who wouldn't do. Yeah,
right. And here's the thing about vaccines. It's quite possible that the vaccine is causing lasting health issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like there are, and it might just be a coincidence, but there are professional athletes that are all of a sudden having heart issues.
There's enough evidence to give pause.
To give pause, right?
There could be correlation.
And they might come out and say absolutely. They might come out and say absolutely not, right? But it has removed the ability to have a conversation about it because we've been told we have to fall into one side or the other. And that's where I'm saying, like, find people and sources where you can just have a conversation about it. And that's why, again, I've said this 1,000 times. This is why I've loved our friendship over the years. Yeah. We talk about any topic and have never once got fired up in genuine anger side. Like never. We will like, oh, whatever.
We'll
like,
tease each other. Yeah, but like, that's about it.
I remember when you first came, you did have a lot more liberal responses and point of views than I did. But it was never, I mean, obviously you're still on staff and you keep getting promoted. So like, it's never.
I never got fired.
It never stopped you, right? But it was just one of those things where I'm like, it's a different perspective, you know, and it's okay. if you can't do that, then I think you're just going to intellectually get lazy, and you are opening yourself up to just being controlled and manipulated. And I just think that's a dangerous position. So like you think about when Jesus came, Jesus had such a different perspective on everything that his followers were consistently confused by him.
Mm-hmm.
The people who loved him and trusted him were confused by him because he thought so differently than what was cultural norm. They had to be willing to take in new information. The Apostle Paul, when he had this conversion experience, he was really militant one way. All of a sudden it changed. And you can tell by his writings that he wrestled with that to the very end, where he was just going like, and people were wrestling, well, what about this? And what about that? And are we still supposed to do this? And yet what we see is the beautiful part of God was okay with that. God was okay with people wrestling with their faith. Oh, and one last thing. I just had a conversation. I'm not going to say names because I didn't ask permission. I had a conversation with these parents whose children are in the process, still Christian, love God, but are in the process of deconstructing their faith. And they've even used that phrase with the parents. The parents were like, when they heard that, were really nervous about that.
Probably scared,
Yeah, devastated, because they're lifelong Christians. Oh my goodness, this is heartbreaking. And I said to them, I was like, can I give you a different perspective? Deconstruction is not only normal, it's super healthy. Mm-hmm. We all, every single one of us, should be deconstructing our lives, but true deconstruction has the intention to reconstruct.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm deconstructing. I'm tearing down
that's
everything.
The difference between that and rebellion, right? Rebellion is just trashing stuff and breaking it down. Anarchy. Deconstruction leads to the construction of something that's stronger, more firm.
Deconstruction has more the idea of like checking the foundation of something. Is this still solid? Whatever, and pulling out the bricks that are like, you know what? This is weak.
Yeah.
This argument is weak. This behavior is weak. This is unhealthy. You take it all out, and then you go, okay, but I want to reconstruct. So like, if my parent, like the way my parents parented me, if there was unhealthy things, I'm taking that out, but I'm going to put in a healthier version of that so that I can help my kid.
One that's more researched, one that I studied, one that I passionately now believe in because I researched and studied.
Absolutely. Yeah. So theology, politics, and you reconstruct. So that's the healthy part. You deconstruct to reconstruct. Our culture, even in the church world, has trained not to do that. So we were probably even raised in similar environments where it's like, if you question some things theologically, it was like basically you're backsliding. And I'm like, no. It is perfectly healthy. Again, Jesus modeled this for us. It's perfectly healthy to deconstruct if we have the intention to reconstruct. And that's the process, I would say, with everyone. If you don't want to be manipulated and controlled, then you need to take a posture of deconstruction of everything you believe. Why do I believe this? And when someone disagrees or views it differently, to find out why. Why is it? And last thing I'll say is, what hinders us more than anything is to demonize the other side. The moment you demonize someone else, you can't listen to them. And so to say things like they just want to destroy the country, if it's about politics, you're like,
do they really? Do they really? Like,
this person just wants, they're a messenger of Satan trying to deceive it. No, they're not. They just believe things a little bit different because they see the scriptures differently. So like, don't demonize and then have an open mind. Here's where it's really done me well through the years. I have become more solid in my understanding of some truths, and the ones that I've become less, it's just brought freedom to me, not because I feel like like instability in my life. I feel like, oh, there's some beautiful mystery that I get to search out, that I get to seek out and to discover. And what I've learned, like theologically even, like there's like this beautiful gray area on things. And I'm not talking about major issues of morality. I'm talking about there's just like some things with theology. If you go, is it this or this? And I would respond, yes. And I think the same thing with politics. Like there are some things I see from the other side of where I lean, and I go, I see it now, and I can celebrate it.
Yeah. I think about my marriage with my wife in the richness of knowing her in a complex but deep way. So even with the inconsistency of humanity, she changes her mind on things. I've known her since she was 14 years old. Right. She's not the same person. You know what I mean?
For sure.
She's changed. She's grown. More importantly, not even more importantly that, but more importantly, my understanding is my understanding of those things. Yeah. Some of those things maybe haven't changed, but like I have, and I see them differently now. Yeah. There's so much richness in that process. And if you're stuck in, I got saved at 14, and the things that I knew then, it must be exactly the way I see it now. You're missing out on what I was thinking as you were talking is there's such a richness of my faith now that I wouldn't have had if I would have never had the courage to ask questions. Yeah. If I just would have been like, because I would probably when I was younger I was like that, but I've certainly met people like that now as well, where you can tell there's a fear to poke at it. You know what I mean? And to say, what do I actually believe about this? And it's like, well, if I admit that I'm wrestling about that, then it's a box of worms that they're not, or whatever the expression, can of worms. Box of worms. It's a can of worms that you open it up, and now it's Pandora's box. Everything's ruined. Mm-hmm. when you can just have the kind of life that, where for me, deconstruction has looked like a pretty continual process. I've watched you walk through many, never deconstruction in the sense that you've had a crisis of faith. Your relationship with the Lord is always, since I've known you, maybe when you're younger, but since I've known you, has always been steadfast. Like, no, I'm unapologetic. This intimate relationship with the Lord. But the surrounding issues of that and the expectations around that and the implications of that, I've seen you walk through multiple. What do I think about this? What do I think about this? What do I think about this? And as you've pastored me through those things and I've gotten to hear those conversations and be a part of those conversations, it's led to such a depth and joy in my faith where it's like, I'm not intimidated by questions anymore.
Right, yeah.
I feel like I can stand up to them way better because I answered them, because I took the hard way. I took not to be too Christian, but the narrow path. Like, what is the difficult way to look at this? What is the challenging way to look at this? Does that scare me? Is that logical? And then once you actually resolve them, it's like, oh man, my relationship is so much tighter with God because I know him better.
Yeah.
If you never have so that's the Christian take. The political take is just like, you're going to have a more rich or more fulfilling relationship with your political identity if it's more nuanced, if you ask questions about it. If you just believe the same four things forever, it's like you're just going to be a part of that partisan problem. You're going to probably be mad at people a lot more.
Yeah.
Your spiritual fruit might be less because you're frustrated and you're angry when they say be angry. And I don't want to be angry when people say be angry. I don't want that kind of life. I want to ask enough questions that lead me to independent thinking, which can be scary. Goes back to what my mom said as a kid. You got to stand for something. Sometimes it can be kind of weird. Like, I don't want to be squirmy. If I believe, I want to, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of beauty in it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's, to me, like I've said this before, there are two or three major theological things that I differ from where I was 10 years ago. Major theological things. Yeah. And yet I feel closer to Jesus, better in my understanding of the Bible. And what's interesting about it is, like, that journey has not made me weaker. That journey has not made me less stable in my life. It's actually made me more, because like you said, I think when you have 100% security in like someone else's ideas, I feel like that's super unstable. Like that, what I mean by that, like, if my confidence is just like whatever you tell me, then if anything falters in your life, now all of a sudden I'm unstable. But like in my process, it's like, no, it's built on a relationship with God. And so, like, these major issues that I've just studied the scriptures, and I'm still in the process. Like, there will be people that are closest to me that know what I'm talking about, and they'll be like, ask me about it, and I'm like, I don't know where I'm at with those things, and I'm okay with that, because I've been studying them for years now, and I just start to realize I don't believe what I once did, but I don't know where I'm landing. And I'm listening to other people, and it's like this beautiful journey. And here's what I love about it: with an open mind, I feel like God's showing me more and more and more the truth. Like, when the podcast goes off, remind me, because I want to tell you a story.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, there's a part of it where I go, like, all of a sudden now, because I have an open mind, I'm seeing stuff differently. God's showing me stuff differently in theology, and I'm going, oh, I see it now. And whereas I think if you have a closed mind, you just, like, I don't know, you ignore those things. So all that said is, like, I just think it's a happier existence to have an open mind and genuinely searching out truth. Truth can be found. I don't want to ever imply, like, what we're talking about is like everything's relative.
No,
it's not.
No,
But it's just like, we don't have to divide. And the last thing I would say is, like, when you're following a group that uses military language to describe how to handle issues, like, there's a good chance their priority is not relational health. Like, when, you got to fight, you got to dig in, you got to defend. Like, and when you have those, like, types of phraseology, that group is not pushing you toward healthy relationships. And that's where God pushes us. He pushes us toward loving our neighbors. And you can't love them when you see them as the enemy. You can't love them when you have military mindsets. You can't witness
to them.
You
can't. Yeah, absolutely.
At all. So.
Yeah, I think, there's something, the last thing I want to say is just something you just said. It's not that, like, truth is relative. I don't believe that. Like, I believe that truth is truth, and it's absolute.
Right. Yeah.
It helps that I believe in God, who is the author of absolute truth. Like, if he came down, he'd be like, well, this is like the ideal political system that I would have, you know what I mean? But, like,
his ideal political system was theocracy.
Yeah, 100%, because he's perfect. And he's like, and so, but the reality is, it's not that I don't think that. So when I'm open-minded, it's not because I'm open-minded that truth changed. It's that my perception has changed. It's that, I may have not had that right. And I think that's the difference of, like, someone who's like a universalist, like, there's no objective truth, make your own truth. No, I don't believe that. I'm just confident in my own brokenness to know that I haven't solved it yet. You know what I mean? And that's where I want to be aggressively humble and be like, no, I could be wrong about this, because the truth is out there. I just can't ever, like, put my flag down and be like, and I know it.
Right, yeah.
Me, Michael Giacomoni, I'm the master of truth and I know it all. It's like, not a chance, dude. I
Right.
promise I'm wrong about stuff.
Oh, for
and
sure.
I want to know what it
Yeah,
is. And I want to
know.
figure it out
wanna
so I can
find
be
it.
better.
I want to find it. That's the heart of it.
I want to find it and kill it so I can be smarter, at least pretend to be smarter. You know?
So here's the last thing. I just said it, but I'll clarify a little bit more. If you were to ask God, this is going to set some people off. Ready? So this is how I'm going to end my comments.
Nice.
If you were to ask theologically, biblically, what is God's ideal government structure? This will surprise most people. It is not a democracy. It is not even a republic like the U.S. is.
Mm-hmm.
The number one ideal government that God would have is a theocracy, God in charge. Do you know what his second is? Benevolent dictatorship.
Because
a
at one
king
point
who follows him over the nation, telling everyone what they're going to do. That's God's second best.
Because initially he didn't
choice.
want him to have a king. He's like,
didn't
this
want
is
him to have a
about
king.
me. You're going to worship
the
me. Your
theocracy.
relationship with me directly. With I'm assuming prophets to go tell you like how to execute
Judges,
this stuff.
right?
Judges.
Yeah.
And then they're like, no, we want a king. So it's like, all right, if you want the second best option, he's like, well, we'll try it.
Yeah.
But that's really it. Nowhere do we see democracy voting in anybody.
No.
So that's where sometimes when people try to, I'm not even going to say people, when I try to apply American cultural life, sometimes the Old Testament, it's like the idea of individual freedom is so foreign. Like this is like it's the Wild West. Like,
because the more people you add to a governmental system, the more confusing it gets, the less healthy it gets. Whereas if you have one person who's
submitting to God,
then that's the best system.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, we don't see benevolent dictators. So I'm not saying
never,
but that would be the second best system. So anyway,
absolutely. Well, hey, that was this episode of I Could Be Wrong. We're so glad you joined us. If you found value in it, share it with somebody you know who might enjoy this topic specifically, or just conversation. I hope it blessed you. I hope it gives you tools and resources, or if anything, just gave you a new way to think about things. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again next week.